Alright, hello there. Today is April 8th, new calendar, 2024, and the solar eclipse just happened not too long ago. I've been sick the last 3 or 4 days, and I just ran to town. I came out of my room to go to town to get me some sweet oil for my ears and some iced tea because I'm a little dehydrated. But this video is going to be about a few different things. One is that it's 3 months into my son's transplant, and this is the first time that I have turn this fan down. First time that anybody in the house has gotten really sick. So I had a fever about 100 and 101, something like that, the other night, and it's come and gone a little bit. Massive body aches, fatigue, headaches, earaches, sinuses, sore throat, a lot of mucus in my lungs, really bad. Super duper tired. I didn't sleep the whole time, but I just stayed in the spare bedroom for like the last 2 or 3 days. Quarantined. I was trained in bioweapons mitigation and a healthcare system most of my life, and most people in hospitals don't really practice, from what I've seen, and nursing homes for that matter, from what I've seen, don't really practice very good quarantine stuff. They really don't. But we did a good job at my house, so I pretty much stayed in the spare room, cracked the window, kept the door shut. There's a return vent in that spare room, but it goes to the furnace, which has an ultraviolet light to kill all the bacteria and viruses in the air that pass through it. So that helped, and we got a really good air filter on the system. But of course, that's not going to stop a virus. But the ultraviolet light should have done the job. We have the military filtration systems for biowarfare, have all that on a massive scale. That's pretty much how they do it, more or less. So yeah, we talked to the doctors this week, and they said that he can survive a cold or a flu just like anybody else. It may take him twice as long to heal. So as soon as I noticed I was getting sick, I started quarantining, even before I got a fever. And then when I got a fever, it just confirmed that I did the right thing. I'd only had a brief time period with him early in that day for like maybe 5 minutes or so. And sure enough, he did get some symptoms, but because we did such a good job, by God's grace, keeping the quarantine in effect, as soon as he got sick, he stayed in his room, and his symptoms went away before he got a fever by the next day. And so he went to play with his friends again, Saturday, I think it was. I got sick Friday night. So Saturday he went to play with his friends, and started feeling sick again. So he came back home and went to bed again. I took a bath and went to bed, and he was pretty fussy and didn't feel good. He had a sinus headache and earache on one side of his face. His eye was on one side of his face. It was all draining and not. He had a bad sinus infection, what it seemed like, just on one side of his head. So he was fighting it. And so he took it easy for 24 hours again, and then he got better again. So twice since I've been sick in the last 3 or 4 days, he got some symptoms and then beat it. So doing much better than I am. I spent 3 days in bed. So my fever broke and then came back during the night last night, and then I seem to be coming out of it today, but I'm really tired and my lungs are still congested. And I have a lot of aches and pains, but nothing to complain about. Sickness is purifying and it's healing. Contrary as that sounds, that's a natural therapeutics beliefs philosophy, and really an Orthodox Christian one too, for that matter. Suffering is purifying spiritually. So it helps us to acknowledge our mortality and regain a humble perspective on our existence and glorify God and being grateful for all the things that He's granted us, and helps us to turn against our sinful ways, which is very important. So no complaints about that sickness. That's a good thing. But I just wanted to reassure anybody who's going through the transplant, or if you're just curious and wonder what you're going to do in a situation like that with a suppressed immune system, yeah, he can get sick, but he can survive it. And if he gets really bad, they'll intervene, of course. They'll re-hospitalize him and put him on different medications to help him beat whatever it is, whether it's viral or bacterial. But we're not going to have to do that. Doesn't look like. Looks like he's going to be all right. I will keep quarantining, and it works if you do it correctly. If you actually do a proper quarantine, air filtration or separation isolation, proper bathing. My wife did an excellent job of disinfecting the house, and basically dropping my food off at the door. And I would just go straight. The bathroom's right next to the bedroom I was in. I'm just going in and out of that bathroom whenever I needed, real quick, and then right back to my own room. And there's a second bathroom upstairs that everybody else can use, or they can use it when I was in. It was just disinfected. So that's how you do it, and it worked, just so you know. So that's the main thing this video is about. The secondary thing, I was bored out of my mind the last 3 days, which is something I'd like to work on. I remember when I was a kid, we didn't have internet. We had books, radio, television, 3 channels, 4 if count BB public station. And I just didn't really have a lot of patience for that. So I spent most of my time reading books or outside playing. And as I'm getting older, and all the garbage that's on the video, on TV and internet, everything's politicized and propagandized, and it's just garbage. Even entertaining movies can't seem to keep it strictly entertaining. They got to put some kind of subliminal nonsense in there. So guess what I'm doing? I'm basically returning to my roots and kind of giving all that garbage up. But I did get bored, and I just laying in that bed all day it's kind of depressing sitting in there. So I listened to a few podcasts. One of my favorites is Timcast. I've listened to some others too. They all have their pros and cons. Timcast, in his early days when I was watching him, I didn't like him too much, because he seemed to flip-flop a lot. You know, he kind of, and he still does it a little bit. He's just not sure where he stands on things. And I think what he's really doing, personally, and I don't mean to accuse him, but it's what it comes across to me, is that he's trying to play to all sides to get the biggest audience possible, and that's, of course, that's what his business is. He's trying to get an audience. So he plays all sides, and he never really commits to a certain side. But then, in the past year or two, he has committed much more so, with the obvious nonsense going on. He's become much more political towards the conservative Trump side, in the political arena. But religiously, he's still kind of doing the flip-flop stuff. He's kind of all over the place. And I can tolerate a certain amount of that, but it just seems like it's fake and phony. And today he made the statement that, you know, he was trying to pontificate on spiritual matters, and basically he was telling people, you know, regardless of whether you're religious or not, just be good. You know, be a nice person, be a good person. And I can't argue with that. I mean, obviously that's common sense. But then he started talking about Christianity and how he can't really commit to it because he can't know. There's just no way to know God. And there's just no way for him to know what's true, what's not. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would God create people to be united to him and to know him intimately within their own hearts and make it so that they can't possibly know him? That just doesn't make any sense. But what does make sense, as God, he reveals himself to people who he knows their hearts, and he knows that they're sincere, and they're not just yanking his chain because they're curious. They're lukewarm. They're not sure whether they want to commit or not. And we're all guilty of falling short and doing stupid things, self most of all. Far worse than anybody I know. Anyway, why would he do that? So and make it so that we can't know him? That's just not true. And the danger of him getting Tim getting on there and saying these kinds of things, and some of his guests just kind of mocking the whole religion. Trying to replace it with science, pseudoscience. Pseudoscience is a religion view of science, or atheism, which is a religion of disbelief. It takes as much faith to have disbelief with all the obvious evidence and history of Christianity being real in the past up to the present day. You would be hard-pressed to find science, real science, theories that had more evidence than Christianity in history and in the physical world. And yet these atheists just are really convinced that because they're smart, I mean, God-given intelligence, they come up with intelligent arguments, and they sound very smart. But you don't have to, like I've said before, I've known a lot of really intelligent people do and say incredibly stupid things, and self included, and this is one of those. It just doesn't make any sense. So I just don't want to follow folks like that. I just don't want to listen to them. I don't want to. It's annoying, and it's frustrating, and it's kind of that way with all the media. There's just so much propaganda. You can't watch a movie anymore or be entertained without some kind of propaganda. And I just don't want. I don't want to hear it anymore. I don't want to listen to it. It's nonsense. So, kind of returning to my roots as best I'm able. I struggle with boredom. They addict you, and that's part of mind control, by the way. Is addiction. And they did it with prostitutes and heroin. You get them addicted to heroin and then make them do tricks. So it's the same thing with the media, social media, and video games and movies and medicine, modern medicine. They get you addicted. Food, the food industry, they get you addicted to garbage, and then you're stuck, and they make a lot of money off of you because you keep coming back for more. So, not to be a grumpy old man, but I just don't want to play that game. I just don't. So I'm going to start resisting it in my own personal life as best I can. And if the world leaves me behind like an old dinosaur, well, that's okay. Because I don't believe the world starts and ends with me. Life is bigger than me, and it's definitely bigger than all this nonsense going on. It will come to an end. So that's my little soapbox for today. Study history. I'm going to keep reading the lives of the saints, and I'm going to keep reading real science and history that points to the obvious, to encourage people to look for themselves and to wrestle within themselves to find these answers. And don't just take the rants of people like myself or Tim or anybody else on social media. Or your college professor. I had a college professor one time, humanities class, I'll never forget. She was trying to convince the class. She was talking about a certain saint, and I can't remember the exact name, but it was one of the ones that was up on a pillar. And I knew the story well at the time because I read it not long before she had this lecture, and she was talking about this saint. And now I shouldn't be telling this story if I don't remember the details, because I'll have to go back and look it up. But basically, the whole moral of the story is that she was given her own slant on this story that had nothing to do with the reality of the story. She was given a political statement about this saint and what he was doing that doesn't really match what the real history was, or the real reason why he was doing what he was doing. And she made it out to be a political thing, and it wasn't a political thing. It was a religious thing. He was drawing attention to Christ and God and our mortality, and she was trying to make it that it was about him trying to defy the government. And so, like a good Orthodox Christian, I raised my hand and I said, yeah, I'm an Orthodox Christian, and that's not really how the story goes. And that's not really what his purpose was. And so I told her what the purpose was, because I had freshly read this saint not too long before this lecture. And I remembered all the details, and I basically told her. And rather than acknowledging what I was saying was valid, I could tell I made her really uncomfortable, which was not my intent. I was just trying to point out that the secular perspective of Orthodox Christianity is quite different than the real Orthodox Christianity when you're actually in it. When you're trying to talk about it from the outside and you don't really understand what it's all about and what it means, and you're going to make huge mistakes. Well, I didn't say that, but I was trying to point that out in an indirect way by telling the actual story. And she just said, well, that's interesting. And then she changed the subject and went on to something completely different. And never really acknowledged or never said that she would look into it and follow up or anything like that. I didn't expect her to acknowledge my validity on the spot, obviously, because I was unintentionally challenging her authority of knowledge. That wasn't my purpose. My purpose was to correct the incorrect statements being made about the saint, and to draw people's attention to the fact that there's plenty more where that came from. Christianity gets misrepresented all the time. Oh well. Alright, well, I'm rambling nonsensically at this point. It's been 18 minutes, and I'm making sense, but I'm just tired, and I'm not thinking real clear. I'm kind of fuzzy-headed right now. So, yeah, main point was my son's healing is going well, and how to properly quarantine to protect your family. And it doesn't have to be a liver transplant. It could be another COVID incident or something like that. So you properly, because I can almost guarantee there's going to be more. You need to know the proper procedures and basically that for viruses, you need isolation from air supply, or filtration, proper filtration and purification of the air in the environment. You need to isolate the sick people. They need sunshine and fresh air, and so does everybody else in the home. And you need to be really good with hygiene and cleanliness. 99% of the bacteria and viruses will be washed off if you just use good soap. Wash yourself properly with soap. It doesn't have to be Don't disinfect yourself, because then you'll make yourself sick, because your immune system is made up of bacteria. So you spray yourself down with Lysol and you're guaranteed to get sick. Yeah, just practice good common sense. Isolation and cleanliness, basically. Alright. I'm gonna shut up now. I'm tired. I talk too much when I'm tired. Pray for me, a sinner. God bless. Over now.